Hello. Hello, members. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone else as well that's in attendance. It's now 2:30, and welcome to today's meeting of the Crime and Disorder Joint Scrutiny Committee. Thank you all for attending. My name is Phil Matthews, and I'm the Assistant Democratic Services Officer at Basingstoke and Dean Council. I will open this meeting until the committee decides to elect a chair. But first of all, I will just quickly read out some housekeeping alongside some other alerts. So, fire evacuation. There are no fire alarms scheduled for the meeting. This meeting. So therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. And mobile phones, please switch your phones off or onto silent, and the microphone button, whenever you wish to speak, is the right-hand button, just to let you guys know. So I'm going to move on to election of the chair. Are there any nominations for the chair for today's meeting? Councillor Minnis-Bound.
Thank you, Phil. I'd like to nominate Councillor Jackie Tustain.
Are there any other nominations? No. Has that been seconded? Councillor Hart, you're seconding that. Is that agreed? Agreed. Councillor Tustain, would you like to take the chair, please?
Well,
Sorry, I was just a question, if I may, Jackie. I'm just conscious, when I was the chair of the partnership, we couldn't have our scrutiny meeting unless we had a scrutiny member from every authority, and I think we're missing Rushmore.
this could be a very short meeting.
Sorry, Phil. Yeah, I'm just very conscious that when I was chair, and I know we've looked at the terms of reference since then, and I can't remember when the terms of reference whether we excluded what we did last time. Because when I was the chair and the only councillor from Basingstoke and Dean, I sought permission from the scrutiny committee to basically swap sides and become a scrutineer. And have we got the portfolio holders from all three authorities? If we have, I don't know whether that's an option rather than not having the meeting. But again, I haven't read the terms of reference recently.
Phil, Christine's just spoken to Halla, who was down to come today, but she's not going to be able to attend the meeting today.
Right, so I've sought advice from the council's monitoring officer, and as the committee is quorate in terms of voting members in our constitution, the meeting can go ahead. So we shall resume to item number 2, and I'll hand it back to Jackie to take over again.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, well, welcome everybody to Basingstoke, and apologies, I will say, for the delay from one of my colleagues in Basingstoke, Simon. But it's quite right and proper to check these things and make sure that we are conducting business properly. Okay, so item number 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Simon is here, Councillor Meansbound is here, substituting for Paul Miller. And we've also received apologies from Councillor Nadia Martin and Councillor Martin Tennant from Rushmore and Councillor Steve Forster from Hart. Are there any other apologies that anybody wishes to mention now? Oh, okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th September 2024. Are the committee, particularly the returning members who were at the meeting last time, happy that the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th September 2024 are an accurate record of the meeting? Okay, thank you. So I've had nods. Do we need to propose and second? No. Okay, that's it. Okay, so I will now sign the minutes. So what I'm going to do now, sorry, I jumped the gun and I didn't do the allowing time for introductions around the room. So we will start, if I start here with John.
Yes, Councillor John Mackay, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council and Cabinet Member for Communities, Partnerships and Inclusion. Thank you.
Kirsty Jenkins, Executive Director, Hart District Council.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mark Renola for Hart District Council, Community Safety Officer.
Hello, Councillor Christine Guinness, Rushmore Borough Council, Portfolio Holder for Neighbourhood Services.
Good afternoon, David Lipscombe, Community Safety Manager for Rushmore Borough Council.
Good afternoon, Debbie Mason, Community Safety Team Leader, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. Hello, Hayley O'Grady, District Commander for Basingstoke, Hampshire Constabulary. Good afternoon everyone, Gillian Cox, District Commander for Hart and Rushmore.
Good afternoon, I'm Sue Watt. I'm a Team Manager for Hampshire Youth Justice Service, covering the Hart and Rushmore area.
Good afternoon, I'm Jeanette Fernley. I'm a Team Manager covering the Basingstoke, Dean and Andover area for the Hampshire Youth Justice Service.
I'm Jill Butler, District Councillor in Hart.
Stuart Bailey, Councillor, Hart.
Hello, I'm Councillor Stacey Hart for Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council.
Councillor Simon Meansbound, Borough Councillor at Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you, everybody. So now we move on to item 5, which is the performance review of the Safer North Hampshire Strategic Community Safety Partnership. And the Councillor Becky Williams is going to introduce the report along with any officers where necessary.
Thank you, Jackie. So I'm Councillor Becky Williams, Councillor at Rushmore Borough Council and the outgoing Chair of the Community Safety Partnership. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm would like to thank you for the opportunity to present the annual report, the performance report for the Safer North Hampshire Community Safety Partnership for 2024 to 2025. Our partnership continues to bring together a wide range of statutory and non-statutory partners to tackle crime, antisocial behaviour, community safety challenges across Basingstoke and Deane, Hart and Rushmore. The work is underpinned by evidence and shaped by the annual strategic assessment, which helps target our efforts where they're needed most. Crime overview for this period. I am very pleased to report a reduction in overall crime for this year. A total of 23,877 crimes were recorded, which is a 4% decrease compared to last year. Notable reductions include robbery, which was down by 18%, drug offences down by 7%, weapon possession down by 20%, theft and criminal damage also fell along with public order offences. Importantly, there was no significant rise in violence against the person, which remains a key area of monitoring. In relation to our key strategic priorities, the 5 priorities that we highlighted this year and focused on were identified through the strategic assessment. These were improving feelings of safety and health outcomes in public, private and virtual spaces, tackling serious violence, particularly in higher risk communities, addressing antisocial behaviour, a persistent concern across the area, responding to domestic abuse through both prevention and intervention, and managing town centre related crime and antisocial behaviour, a newly introduced priority based on evidence that we had collected. Key achievements and progress. Feelings of safety. We know that even if crime goes down, people may not always feel safer. And that's why we've run targeted community engagement. And that's included surveys, school programmes and visible patrols across our boroughs. Initiatives like Think Stay Safe and hate crime awareness groups have supported vulnerable residents and built confidence. The use of the Home Office Safer Streets funding has helped deliver improvements in areas like lighting and environmental design to enhance public perception of safety. In relation to serious violence, we've made good use of the new serious violence duty, working closely with the Violence Reduction Unit. Local level CSP subgroups are using data to track hotspots and develop action plans accordingly. Projects like Choices are educating young people about the dangers of exploitation and knife crime. Our multi-agency panels are focusing on high-risk individuals through initiatives like Operation Fortress and the Habitual Knife Carriers Programme. Domestic abuse. We've strengthened coordination with local and county-wide domestic abuse partnerships. High-risk cases are managed through MARAC, and we've supported training and accreditation, including White Ribbon and DHAA status in Basingstoke. However, we face funding pressures due to changes in how domestic homicide reviews are resourced, and this is a key area of concern going forward. Antisocial behaviour. ASB remains one of the most visible and disruptive issues in our communities. Our partnership action groups, or PAGs as they're known, continue to deliver a joined-up early intervention approach. We've used ASB tools such as PCPOs, community protection notices and acceptable behaviour contracts effectively. Campaigns targeting fly tipping and vehicle nuisance have helped address local concerns, and early resolution continues to be a key success factor. Town centre crime and ASB. This was a new priority introduced for 24-25. We've taken a targeted approach, focusing Home Office funding on hotspot patrols and engagement with town centre businesses. Tools like DISC and town centre forums have helped build better relationships and intelligence in this area. CCTV improvements and successful events such as the Basingstoke Festival have helped increase footfall and enhance the sense of safety in town centres. Challenges and considerations going forward. While we've seen real progress, resource pressures across all services continue to impact delivery. The change in responsibility around the domestic homicide reviews and reductions in youth services may affect our long-term capacity. In addition, data sharing remains a barrier, particularly across sectors like health and housing. We must remain focused on early intervention, especially for youth-related ASB, mental health and community cohesion issues. We also need to prepare for future local government reform and ensure that our partnership structures are robust and adaptable. In conclusion, the CSB has delivered coordinated, evidence-led action in a year of continued challenge. Across all 5 priority areas, we've seen strong examples of multi-agency working and with innovative projects and a shared commitment to keeping our communities safe. I would personally like to thank all of our partners, both statutory and voluntary, for their hard work and contribution to the Community Safety Partnership. Finally, I'd like to recognise the importance of this committee in holding the partnership to account. Your scrutiny and insight will help strengthen our performance and ensure that we will continue to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, now the guidance here is that we look at focusing on the 5 priority areas as we go through this. Improving feelings of safety and health outcomes, so that's public, virtual and private space. Serious violence, ASB, domestic abuse, and the town centre business crime and ASB. And this is also the partners, so to able to provide an update and overview of the contributions made to each priority. So I don't know if anybody would like to start with any questions.
It's not a question. I'm finding it quite hard to hear. I mean, your voice is quite clear, Becky less so, and whether it's the air conditioning units or are these any use to?
I can hear you clearly,
Yeah.
and I think, yes, I think, to be honest, I think it is the air conditioning units. Now, I don't know, for everyone's comfort, whether we want to turn one off maybe and see if that helps, because normally when we have council in here, it's quite clear. Or if everybody can make an effort to speak very close to the mic, that might help, actually. Simon?
I just have a question, and it's really for the 3 portfolio holders. It's always a challenge, isn't it, when we've got a partnership which involves 3 different local authorities. And one of the key elements, thinking about the priorities, Jackie, is just thinking about, us understanding how the 3 local authorities in the political leadership work together to generate that leadership for the whole community safety partnership as a whole.
Anybody would like to pick that one up?
I just wonder, I've got some looks, Jackie, I just know whether I need to be clearer. It's like, what is it you do to make sure the 3 local authorities work together in your political leadership role as portfolio holders to make sure that the officers, because that's the reality, isn't it, as far as the democratic service that we provide, that says actually, how does the leadership get provided by the 3 portfolio holders working together? How does that happen? What is it you do to make sure it does what it needs to do?
I think Councillor Meansbound is asking a question that is answered by the fact that Safe North Hampshire partnership exists, and regular meetings through the year where topics can be discussed.
Thank you. I'll add a question on that, because I'm going through the report, which is very good, thank you very much, but I was just wondering, because there's quite an emphasis on things around data and the work that the analytical teams do, but without seeing any of that data, I think that kind of speaks to Councillor Meansbound's question about how do we know whether it works. Did you want to come in?
Well, and I think that's my question. It says, okay, the Community Safety Partnership works, and the Community Safety Partnership has its meetings, but as 3 leaders, do you have a look at the evidence? Do you meet regularly outside of those meetings to say, do you know what actually is the emphasis in the right place? Do we understand what the evidence is? I suppose there's just understanding a little bit behind how we get to this, because it looks very evidence and action, but actually that's not just what the partnership's about.
So, I mean, can I just say,
I've
only actually just taken over the portfolio. So Becky has sat on the portfolio since May. But since joining, and I've only had 1 official meeting, but actually the meeting was very beneficial to understand what was going on in the other areas as well as ours. I obviously have regular meetings with David, James in my team, and know what's going on, but the meeting gave me added benefit actually to sit with James afterwards and go, oh well, actually Hart are doing this, do we do that? And actually that you do gain a lot from it, you know, and you're able to scrutinise your own team quite regularly from it. So I certainly, having just had one meeting, would say it was very beneficial. I mean, I don't know if Becky wants to add to that.
So I think as a portfolio holder, I felt it was very beneficial having someone that holds a portfolio in that area in the chair. As Christine said, it gives you a really good overview of what's happening, of the partners that are engaging. But I also was a critical friend. I felt myself as a critical friend because I had sent an email out encouraging partners to attend because we were sort of finding they weren't really, some, not all, weren't engaging. We also facilitated a workshop to try and bring sort of more cohesion, find out and sort of understand what data we could get. So we were sort of proactive in that approach. And I think behind the scenes, all portfolios will be asking those questions of their officers. It might not be visible sort of in the report, but from my perspective, the officers involved from the 3 districts are completely committed to this. There's no doubt about that. And it was just really my concern was how can we sort of improve it and improve engagement. And I think from my perspective, that was sort of the role that I had in it.
Okay, so I think something that I've picked up from this is that, and I absolutely do not doubt the commitment, and I know from working with officers locally, the commitment they have to their areas is absolutely commendable. I think what might be coming out here from what I've looked at, as I say, I've only just joined this and I've come in, and prior to being involved with this, I really hadn't got a clue about the CSP partnership, which to me means that we've got potentially room for improvement around communication of these issues. And I know, because those that know me know I'm also on Hampshire County Council, and I do know some of the challenges they've got staffing and finance with probation, for example, but I'm seeing 2 empty seats from probation up there. There's a lot of other gaps where we haven't got partners here, which actually is really disappointing because this is, from my understanding, one meeting. We've got a year of this. So I've got a report that doesn't reflect on the successes that potentially we've talked about, other than a few brief words in a few paragraphs. It talks about all the partnerships, and from what you've said, Becky, there's clearly a lot of work going on behind the scenes. But I think there's a disservice possibly being done here that could be reflected and pulled up to come in. Simon.
Well, and I'm not criticising the report. I just want to know how it works. I think there's fundamentally something that's really important. I was the chair of the partnership for 4 years. I get a lot of it's what happens outside the partnership meetings. I get a lot of it is about scrutinising those conversations. I think it is admirable that we still have a councillor as the chair of the partnership up and down the country. I'm not sure councillors go to any of the meetings particularly, so I think that's a big tick. I'm not trying to test, I'm trying to support by saying this is what we do and this is why we do it differently and why we do it really, really well. I think it is sad to see when we have a statutory function with statutory partners, having so many statutory partners missing in the one meeting per year. Part of me wonders, Chair, whether we should have a request that says, I'd quite like to see whether there's a summary of whether our statutory partners have attended the CSP meetings. David will know only too well, when I was the chair, we casually started calling Hampshire County Council a sleeping partner, and after a year they didn't like the minutes saying that. So I think there's just something about being really clear that we have all the people in the room that we need to have to do a really, really good job, in addition to everything that's written in the report.
Daniel.
Thank you. I'd probably just add a bit of context around sort of the way the partnership works, which might help to expand on some of the questions as well. And I think when we look at the Community Safety Partnership, it very much is a partnership made up of different organisations and authorities which have a statutory duty to be part of that. Now, as a local authority, we have a role in that coordination and administration of the Community Safety Partnership, but very important for us to recognise that it's a partnership commitment, and I think that's an emphasis within our meetings. It's the Community Safety Partnership isn't a local authority resource, and that's where potentially some of our challenges exist in relation to how we can promote the work of the partnership. We're quite good within our individual organisations of saying this is what we do. That various different agencies regularly put out their own messages in relation to these are the successes we've had. This is what we've done. This is how we're helping to meet them priorities. It's that factor of it being a partnership and operating within that as single agencies, but together presents some of them challenges for us.
I'm going to ask the question about under normal scrutiny, we would put recommendations forward. This might be one for you, Phil. So if there were recommendations, where would they go from here?
Thank you. Yeah. From my understanding, the recommendations from the CSP will go back to the council's, each respective council scrutiny committees, for them to either do further work on or analyse further. So, for example, in Basingstoke, I'm not sure about the other councils, but in Basingstoke that would go back to the Resident Services Committee. Mm-hmm. So that would go back to your committee for you to potentially do further work on, because in the Constitution it says reports from the Crime Disorder Committee go there. So I'm not sure if that helps, but
probably come in as well on that. So yes, whilst we recommendations can be made and can go back to each local authority, obviously, as I mentioned before, this isn't just about local authorities, this is also about the wider partnership. And this is where sometimes this committee, and we work in a slightly different way, and quite an unusual way, that we've got all partners in the room at an ordinary council committee meeting. But I think it's important to emphasise that recommendations made, and I think the scrutiny of the Community Safety Partnership is a really important part of our annual work, because that can look at and to be transparent, to have that effectiveness, to have things which we can take back and look at as a partnership and review together amongst partners in relation to how we best conduct that to meet the needs of local residents which you represent.
I wonder, Jackie, it's worth just picking up, you were talking about data, and it's about partnerships, and we know it's difficult because it's being scrutinised by local authorities, even though it's partners within a wider public service. Then I think there's something for me that says the report should be less about quantitative data, and that's what would be really helpful about having all the partners, because actually the best test, because we're fundamentally not here to look at whether the police solve robberies, we're here to look at does the partnership work and how effective it is. It's partners going, do you know what, this is the best one I've been in because I'm the new district commander for Basingstoke, and actually this is the best experience I've had, etc., etc. So there is something about that you have that qualitative feedback where we can go, this works really, really well, and I know the partnership makes a difference. What we have is a report that says we do some stuff and we're doing more or less of that stuff, not necessarily the partnership is working well. And I don't mean that in a critical way, because I'm sure it is to get the stuff done. It just doesn't say it.
Yeah, I can probably come on in on that. And I think probably a good part of today, and yes, I think obviously the report does focus on some data, and it does focus on some of the work which has been carried out. I think in Appendix 4, we've got some of the highlights which provide not an in-depth but a brief overview of some of the activity taking place across the partnership area. Now, for purposes of bringing that together, that's been summarised to an extent. But I think probably, I know that partners which are within the room will be able to expand on some of them points as well, and to be able to highlight some of the proactive and positive work which has taken place in relation to delivering against that partnership plan.
Hi there. So I think from, for example, a policing perspective in terms of how the partnership works, obviously we have all these kind of slightly bigger, more formal meetings, but I think, you know, on a day-to-day basis, the partnership works in a very almost simplistic way in terms of we have lots of meetings within the police, and actually our partners here join us on those on a day-to-day basis. So actually where we have issues of all the things that are discussed within the kind of priorities of the CSP, these are discussed on a daily basis. So feelings of safety, our antisocial behaviour, most serious violence. So on those daily meetings, those discussions are had, information is shared, the work that's ongoing by ourselves and our partners, how we factor in, how we work together is absolutely covered on that. So I think whilst we have the kind of collective bigger meetings which then focus on all the data, the context behind that is also the partnership, which is that day-to-day engagement, the fact that, for example, my officers within Hart and Rushmore are based within council buildings, so that contact is there on a regular basis. And so those relationships and understanding and problem-solving processes have that day-to-day contact and not necessarily just that kind of monthly, quarterly, 6-monthly, let's get together, talk about something and not really be able to do anything about it. It happens continuously.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. I mean, certainly the first meeting I attended, the best thing we can ever do is communicate with each other. And it's putting across saying, look, we've got a problem with this. You know, we've tried this, it didn't work. Has anyone else had this problem? How did you solve it? And it really is just about pure communication and working together. Yeah, we've got an issue at the moment, and one of the other members was able to say, actually, I've got the email that you need for that, you know. And it's that working together to solve the issues that are out on our streets. And you know, certainly that first meeting, that absolutely worked. So it's just communication.
I think if I may, Chair, I'd just like to sort of add to what's been said in terms of a degree of agility that we have within the partnership as well. So we've got the priorities that we obviously concentrate on, but if we're spotting things through the daily meetings that we have with the police, or there's information that's coming in and we're picking up on a trend and it may sit a bit outside of this, we're not boxed in because of the priorities. We do proactively work on those as well.
I just want to pass a comment. That's fundamentally what I'm looking for, not a sheet that says, in the last 12 months we've done this. We've been adaptable. Okay, we've agreed 5 priorities, but actually within that, we've moved because suddenly something's happened in Basingstoke, something's happening in Aldershot, or something popped up that we weren't experiencing. That's fundamentally our job of scrutiny, not to look at your report and say the data makes sense. Is that actually, is everybody working together in a leadership role? Do the leadership, and I say this in the political leadership because actually we're a local authority scrutiny panel, do they own it? Do they understand it? Are they over the detail? Are they involved? Is the partnership as a whole, is it agile? Is it adaptable, etc., etc.? That's what I'm looking for, to be really clear.
Okay. Oh, go on, Helen.
Press my button. If it helps, coming into Basingstoke, so I was district commander of another district previously, and one of the things that was really clear to me straight away was that I didn't need to worry about the partnership. So, and that was an area that I did a lot of work in previously, but the connection and the communication and how we work together from a partnership perspective is something that I looked at and I oversaw when I first came in. I'd been told lots of really good stuff about it, but I wanted to see it for myself. And that is absolutely the case. So it's not something I have to worry about because it works.
Yeah, I can probably come in from my own experiences as well, based on being in the community safety world for a number of years, and how we work together locally. And I think I look at that as on the sort of day-to-day basis at a tactical level, and delivering them operational operational parts which we all have in as organisations individual responsibilities for, and then at the wider partnership level as well. And I think probably in relation to a couple of examples over the past year, very much looking back to probably the summer of last year following the tragic circumstance which happened in Southport, and actually the adaptability which took place then from partners to adapt to a situation, unprecedented situation, something which the spread of that across the country, and actually we saw impacts of that across the community safety partnership area, particularly with our colleagues in Aldershot. But that affected everyone. There was communities were really quite concerned about that, and I think that was around how we come together, work together, and look at solutions. Very much that's done at that kind of tactical level. But then it's about responding to that as well, and we know what at partnership level. So it's taking that back and looking at that for our community safety partnership and going, well, this is the sort of things which we're seeing. This might be an issue. That comes into things like considering serious violence, for an example. We know that there's been a growing trend over the last decade in knife crime and other issues of a serious violence nature. So it's around how we can work together with colleagues and look at adapting to doing that. Often that's about trying to be ahead of the curve. So it's around utilising the data which we've got, the cost of living impacts of that, which has had on local communities, and poverty has obviously been a factor which we can consider, and we know that that's a risk. And I think looking at that as a partnership and saying these are the risks we know about, how can we then best respond to them is something which we try and do through our partnership level work at strategic level.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. Yeah, so certainly the comments we're hearing are really encouraging to see how the partnerships worked. I guess the point that's been made is that it would be useful for the next meeting to have a little bit of that, to tell the story of what the main focus of the partnership meetings have been about in terms of the partners on there, and also to have some data as to the attendance at partnership meetings, so we can see if there are any partners who are less engaged, and then we can just ask questions around that.
Stacey.
Apologies for a moment ago. I have my phone on silent. That was my alarm telling me to pick the kids up from school. I forgot that separate item. But on this item, I think, yes, to add to what's been said, it would be useful, certainly, and I don't necessarily want to put a lot of work onto officers and representatives who already have quite enough on their plates. Certainly coming into this, and particularly because it is only a yearly function, it would be good to, as well as some of the things that have been talked about, have a maybe some sort of pictorial overview even of how the bodies involved and what flows from where and to what and by and via whom. There are, and I promise I have read it cover to cover a couple of times. There is a lot of great work in here. There's a lot of information, and the very, very similar and repeating acronyms and report names and things often are a little difficult to trace. And when you only come to it once a year, that can be a difficult thing. It doesn't need to be particularly complex, but some sort of shape, if that makes sense. Just to be able to digest it very, very simply, without having to burden anyone with reams of questions ahead of time or after the fact.
Yeah, thank you. I remember I'm on ONS in Hart, and I remember commenting last year, it'd be really nice to know, because a lot of the work that the partnership does is sort of bread and butter. It's kind of, it doesn't change from year to year. What have you done differently over the past year? And we were speaking about the challenging events locally, the repercussions from Southport, and I know Rachel, our community safety officer, was going to be in touch with Rushmore to see if there was any lessons they could learn, because there were incidents at a hotel there. Was there anything we could learn if we had, hotel where we have the same flare-up of problems? So what are we doing differently year on year that differentiates from the previous year?
Anybody want to speak to that?
I can probably kick off with just one example, and it's probably a more Basingstoke specific example, but it does involve a partnership response to things, and I think that's in relation to recognising that actually there's been sort of changes in officers, and for a lot of the work out and about and with local communities, often, and certainly from our experience, suggests that having that ability to work closely with your colleagues, not just internally but externally, is really, really valuable. And as part of that, as we've seen some new faces within the police, within our housing associations, within the Safe Communities team at Basingstoke, it's been around. What we've done is we've looked at a joint training and networking day. So there's been some events which have taken place, usually on a 6-monthly basis. So we've had 2 or 3 of these already, which bring together local bobbies, bring together our Council Safer Communities team and colleagues from our housing associations as well. And that the main purpose of that is to get together. These are our officers which are out and about within local communities on a day-to-day basis. This is about them getting to know each other, working together, understanding the communities in the best way possible in a cohesive way, and then looking at where we can bring in particular training opportunities as well to help support and enhance their shared learning and development and understanding. That's been really, really valuable, and we've seen it's been really encouraging to see the connections which have been made and that partnership response to stuff. And I think it's quite often the case these days when we're doing this work, there might be a problem which we can't solve as a local authority. It might need the police or the housing association, but it's then being able to pick up the phone, go back to colleagues and say, can you help with this? How can we best resolve this? Certainly every situation which we come across in communities can be different, whilst there's similarities, and we've obviously got different tools and powers which we can use. Every situation is different and needs a problem-solving approach and managed in a very different way. And I think having them people which have already got them connections, that partnership, working in professionality together to go out and have best impact for local communities is really important. So that's certainly been something of value for us to consider as a partnership.
Would I be able to jump in on the back of that, Dan, if okay, despite having no members, unfortunately, from Rushmore here? I will speak for Rushmore, but also Hart and Basingstoke, and say that a particular good piece of work that I think highlights some of that is the Safer Streets 5 Home Office funding, which I've got mixed feelings about how it went overall, because it was a lot of hard work. But by working together as Hart, Rushmore and Basingstoke, in partnership with Portsmouth, who obviously were a great help on that, and brought us into the whole process, we actually gained over around £200,000 for the 3 areas that I think if we hadn't worked together in that way, that wouldn't have happened. And we brought that money into the area, then split between the 3 areas, which allowed work for environmental improvements in some of our ASB hotspots. I know detached youth work in Rushmore, it kicked off a programme there which we've been sorely lacking for years, and from there I've then got more funding for that to continue, because it actually helped show that it's got worth as well. We've had summer artwork projects to try and brighten up some less cheerful areas of Rushmore, as we have quite a lot of hoarding at the moment. So, but overall, I think that's a really brilliant example, the Safe Streets 5, that it ran over 2 years. So we weren't granted the money last year, we were granted the money year before, but it was a 2-year process which has now come to an end. But I definitely think that's a brilliant example of the partnership working together.
I'm going to come in the questions nicely came on from something Daniel had said, but actually, in the report you mentioned housing associations, for example, as one partner. Now, obviously, it might be that these are worked with more locally, but obviously a lot of the housing associations cover quite a broad area, and it would be lovely to see, and I know Simon's talked about more of the qualitative data, but actually in this qualitative data in the sense of success stories and also the learning that maybe the partnership provides, so that where a housing association working in one area, for example, may well be performing slightly better than in another district, would be really helpful to see how that works and how the partnership then brings that together to get the synergy and a benefit from it. And that's kind of something that I would love to see, because I think that would be really good.
I think one thing that I often note as an officer is we do a huge amount of work with our housing associations, especially Vivid Homes across the area, who I think across Hart, Rushmore and Basingstoke are the largest provider. And they're not a member of our community safety partnership as such. They're not a statutory member, and they're not a co-opted member either. I don't know if it's my place as an officer to suggest this, but I think it would be helpful for some discussion of the partnership around what we can do to bring our housing associations into that partnership, how we can do that, especially associations such as Vivid, because absolutely the work we do with them day in, day out, I think there's definitely some benefit to look at that.
Thank you, David. That's exactly the point I put on. And actually, funny enough, because there are also the voluntary community that will provide an awful lot of support. I mean, particularly things like around domestic abuse. There are various organisations, and they will be working potentially with county, for example, housing associations, as we've mentioned, and there will be other bodies as well. And I think I did notice that they're not part of the partnership, and obviously, although you're consulting, I'll let Daniel come in with some thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor. For me, I think it's around, and when we look to, obviously, housing associations haven't got that statutory duty placed on them as our partners in the room have today. I think the importance is of how, as a partnership and as partners, how we do engage with them is really important. I think probably an example which can link this in as well as probably one of the previous comments was around what have we done differently, and I think we can probably an example which I've got in relation to that is looking specifically at domestic abuse. We know domestic abuse is a priority for the Community Safety Partnership, and there's lots of work which happens which is highlighted in the appendix for of work which has taken place. One of them things is around recognising the value, and I think across the partnership, and not just across this priority, but all of the priorities, whilst we have statutory partners and have statutory duties in place in relation to working together for the benefit of community safety, it's also around there's many different partners from the voluntary and community sector which contribute massively to community safety outcomes. And I think it's around recognising some of the contributions and the input into that as well, and how we best do that. When I go back to my example around domestic abuse, we actually brought a numerous selection of partners which support providing services around domestic abuse together as part of a community safety partnership event, a workshop event, where we looked at that, brought everyone together, looked at them contributions towards the priority and how everyone is working together to support that. Then on more of a ground level, and I know internally in Hart and Rushmore and at Basingstoke, we also have and coordinate our own domestic abuse forums as well. So that's again bringing them partners together from that, from partners which may include the Hampshire-wide domestic abuse partnership, but can also include them local providers as well, to come together to share ideas, share knowledge and understanding to best support community safety outcomes relating to domestic abuse.
I don't know how my colleagues would feel. I mean, I think David has mentioned the idea of having these other people. They're not statutory, and actually it's the word statutory I think I find it's like almost slightly disappointing, because it's like this is what we must do and this is what therefore we're doing what we must do. When I became a councillor, I didn't become a councillor to do what I must do. I came to council to make a difference, and I know for a lot of other people it might not be resonate, and I know everybody's doing their best, so please don't take that in the wrong way. But I'm always about proactive change and making things better for people, which I know all you guys want to do as well. So I don't know what anybody else thinks. Simon?
I think it's a great idea. I think there's a reality, isn't it? I touched on the conversation we had a few years ago about Hampshire County Council, because actually they were a statutory partner, but from that conversation we realised that they didn't have anybody in their structures. They didn't have a single person that was the appropriate person to come to a community safety partnership, which is where the working groups came from, because it was easy to get a HCC representative when you were talking about this and this and this, and it was somebody to talk about everything. So I think being really pragmatic and adapting, I think, is really, really good, Jackie, to be honest. And also just thinking about, are there things that we can learn from other places? There's something about telling the story, and I've heard much more about the story in the last 15 minutes, about the questions about businesses. So we had lots of changes. We've done business as usual. We've got extra money in. We're building on that money. That's a much more powerful story that makes a lot of sense to us as far as what's happened, why it's happened, and what the challenges have been. And I think then you do and what are we talking about doing in the future? Because there's then something about taking it forwards and picking up the challenges about working, well, who do we need to work with? What do we need to work on? So lots of things have reduced, but things like shoplifting have increased. There are lots of things that we know, and forgive me because I don't know how you pronounce the acronym. It feels like it should be UK PAC to me. Is it UK PAC rather than UK PAC? About, well, what does that mean? I'm conscious in places like Portsmouth, the neighbourhood policing teams are now sharing all their beat information because they've clearly got a Strava type app as far as the new button on the app that officers have, and saying, well, actually, what's our view about visibility so people feel safer? And I think there's something about that story that then continues about, so where would we like to take it, or what are we going to try and do? And I think involving other people, because they're the people that can make a difference, is great.
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of making a committee that's massive and unwieldy, but I think it's possibly opening our arms, basically, to invite those that are passionate about doing this and looking at it from there. Daniel.
Thank you. Part of that, I think, for me, is around, we've certainly, when I refer back to the previous example I gave around bringing partners together around domestic abuse, I think that was really valuable and successful. And I think when we look at our strategic priorities, and I think it's how we engage other partners within that. I mean, sitting around the table for our quarterly strategic meetings, I don't think there's necessarily the value in having lots and lots of people. I think it needs to be and probably from my recommendation, I would recommend that the smaller group of partners and our co-opted partners within that to move forward. But then looking at each individual priority which has been identified through the partnership plan, and I think it's then how we can reach out and engage with other partners, and I think that's probably something to build on as well over the coming year.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a really good point. We acknowledge that David's mentioned and other people's positive comments on that. Because housing already sit on a lot of our work. For example, the antisocial behaviour, the ASB officer group, which was resurrected, and we have housing officers come to that. So an example would be the ASB case reviews, formerly the triggers. We're just making sure that aligns across Hampshire, people's access to it, how we provide that service consistently and in a uniformed way. So, as I say, housing associations play a part in that, and we're just having some training from Resolve that we're sort of bringing online for everybody there. They also sit on our sort of PAG groups, or our people, our places. But I think what would really benefit, because as David says, Vivid have got a big footprint over the CSP, others less so, but we do have really good relationships. But I think it needs to be acknowledged that there are relationships that aren't as good, and I think it would actually sort of just tie some of those people in, because they just have got a lot of tools, they've got a lot of resources as well, so supports for vulnerable people as well, which is often the underlying cause of some of the problems with ASB.
So I'm going to ask a specific question, because I tend to waffle about a bit, as you might have noticed. Is there a general feeling that it would be wrong to extend the invitation on this committee out to these other partners, or would it be kind of like kept quite loose, or is it done at the grassroots level enough?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's important, as Dan says as well, not to make these committees so huge and burden others as well. But I would say there's probably a, key 2 or 3 potential other partners that may be of benefit to the Community Safety Partnership at the strategic level. Because absolutely at the operational level, we've got really good engagement, but then where there are strategic matters that, it potentially useful to discuss and solve, and then that will then filter down and potentially bring improvements in work that way. I can think of an example off the top of my head that something that's really frustrating us in our monthly people meeting for Hart and Rushmore at the moment is the social care element. So many of the people we are discussing, that meeting is where you can refer into it for people who are victims or perpetrators of antisocial behaviour. But essentially the referrals that we get are people who are potentially being cuckooed, vulnerable individuals who have huge social care needs, and those social care needs aren't being seemingly met. Obviously it's a difficult one to discuss without particular partners around the table as well, but at that strategic level, at the operational level, we are struggling so much.
I'm going to ask a question actually about the dimming of street lighting, very specific, and improving feelings of safety, because having known about, obviously we've dimmed the lights around Hampshire, and there was obviously quite a lot of worry that this would make people feel less safe. That's very specific, and I wondered if there's been any feedback on that, because I think this would be exactly where this should come out.
So I think from a kind of personal perspective in policing, I think we probably have certain areas and almost like hotspots that actually would possibly cause our community some form of concern. I know that we have got that ability to turn street lights on when we need it, but ultimately, again, that's not on a regular basis. And the whole point, obviously, I think, is to turn them off more regularly than have them on. So I think it's something that I know that we've discussed previously and came up in terms of issues and concerns amongst the community, but not something that's reared any kind of issue of late. But I don't know if David's got further comment on that.
In Rushmore in particular, we do a community safety survey annually, and I know that is something that comes up every year. I suspect it would probably be similar story across the other areas as well, that it does cause people a lot of worry. I would say on the occasions when there's been something quite serious and worrying going on, and there are the reports, the statistics to back it up, Hampshire County Council have engaged and are quite willing to adjust brightness levels, the times that the street lights are on. That's very, very rare occasions though. But it continues to cause issue and worry. Ultimately, it's not something that we can solve at the district, borough level, or that the police can solve. We deal with lots of queries about it, unfortunately, but...
Yeah, I think it's probably really important to point out as well with us as certainly from a district council perspective, obviously that's not a decision which Basingstoke and Dean, Hart or Rushmore have made as councils. It's Hampshire County Council have control of the street lighting. That's obviously a decision which they've made, but I think as David says, and to pick up on his point, I think there's been good engagement from the county, from if there is areas which come up as an area of concern, if there's been a particular element or increase in crime in a particular area, then the police have that capacity to be able to feed into the council and request that lighting gets increased to whatever it needs to be, and they can certainly take that away and consider that. I think when we look at sort of from an evidence-based perspective in terms of crime and street lighting, there's very limited evidence which associates the two. I think very much it's more of the feeling of safety and the fear of crime which can be impacted by less lighting, but that's obviously a difficult one to cover, and obviously from our perspective we look at that in a number of different ways. Certainly as a local authority we have our community safety patrol officers. I know in Rushmore again, patrol officers which are out and about and can help support people feeling safe as well as a number of other initiatives which help, and that's what we can look at as a partnership. Often these are more individual local level issues which we can look at, but they feed into some of them wider issues which we look at across the area, such as our Safer Streets programme, things like that which have been implemented.
Simon. Oh, sorry, was it Councillor Bailey? Go on, Councillor Bailey, because Simon's had spoken lots.
So I was just going to pick up, because this whole thing about visibility, isn't there? There is a danger that we're stuck in the 1970s where we talk about people in uniform being seen. You know, I raise the point again about, you know, all the time people say to me in my ward, I can't remember the last time I've seen a patrol car. They're absolutely wrong. There's one been around 4 times in one day, maybe. They just don't see them. It's too old-fashioned, and there is something about, you know, what's the conversation about visibility and what it means in the 21st century. And there is something about whether it's a Strava-style map. There is also something about the local co-op. You know, I've got 2 local co-ops. They've got DISC at the head office for at Fareham. They don't report anything. It doesn't get straight over like the DISC system does at Festival Place. There is something about understanding how we get that visibility in a modern way that is out there. And I wonder whether that conversation has happened in the partnership, because it may be police officers, it might be CSPOs, Dan, mightn't it? That says, actually, how do we do that? Because it is, we know the facts and the evidence aren't there, so we have to fill the gap.
Gillian, is that a response?
So, yeah, I completely agree. I think probably for a lot of us, especially within policing, the visibility question comes up time and time again, and we will unfortunately never be in a position to be as visible as what our communities would like. And also for myself and Hayley, we're not, you know, the officers aren't as visible as we would like, but there's some constraints within that which I think are obviously quite well acknowledged. One of the things that for my teams, what I really try and push, again, is coming into that kind of 21st century type remit, is the use of social media. Now, I know obviously it's not to everyone's liking, and we've got certain demographics that wouldn't necessarily appreciate it as much or have access to it in the same way, but we have to go with the times and go with what actually people are working with and how they now engage with people, and a lot of that is through social media. So I absolutely try and push our use of it, whether that's us being out and about so that we can demonstrate we've been places, because unfortunately, you know, we've got a lot of rural communities. We could drive for a long time and not see a single person, but it doesn't mean to say we're not out and about. And actually, how do we kind of spread what we're doing and share what we're doing? And then that also comes into our kind of engagement initiatives, our Cops and Coffee, where we hold those, how we publicise that so that people have that opportunity to come engage with us and share that visible presence. The point you also made in relation to things like DISC, I think certainly within Hart and Rushmore, we absolutely try and capitalise on that where we can. And I know we've got a business manager in Farnborough that is out within the businesses, and we're then out to actually try and engage and actively get people on. We had a lot of success with Fleet over the last year or so, getting our business partners engaged with it so that we can actually have that information sharing. We have that ability to report crimes and deal with it without necessarily a physical person coming and then feeling supported. So again, rise in shoplifting, partly through our reporting mechanisms now. People feel they can report because actually we are doing something about it. And again, when we've done something about it, the publishing of the results in terms of what we've got. Again, along with that comes things like our community behaviour orders, where we've had repeat offenders, got the evidence to get the community behaviour orders on them. We publicise that when we've actually actioned it, and we potentially, someone is then given a sentence for it. So I totally agree. We probably have to work smarter, and we probably actually as a partnership have to think about ways how we do that together. But equally, I know that our partners are out in terms of our I call them the wrong names all the time. There's too many acronyms. PPOs, CPOs, whatever they are.
Yes.
They're out as well. And again, part of our engagement is on those daily meetings. Or we've identified a bit of a problem. Can your teams target those areas there today? And again, it's about that visibility and how we link in and seeing someone out in uniform as much as we can.
Councillor Bailey.
No, thank you for that answer, or those comments. The question I originally had was around shoplifting, and because obviously that figure jumps out in the report. But from what you're saying is some of that is not necessarily more crime, but more reporting of crime, because people will feel that you're going to do something about that. You might want to have a sense that there's been a lot in the national press about almost parts of the country where nothing gets done with shoplifting, it just gets recorded and the police are too stretched. So it'd be interesting to know if that's the case within our area, and whether that 45% increase is across the three districts and boroughs, or centred in one place. My other question, if I can just move on to, was in respect of whether the partnership has focused any of its time focusing what additional pressures we might have with the early release scheme, in terms of making sure people who are coming out of prison, who perhaps weren't expected to be coming out early, have somewhere to live, and any impact that might have on crime locally. So sorry, one was just following on from, and then it's a separate issue, but yeah.
I just wanted to mention DISC, as I know it's come up a few times and stuff. Obviously, in DISC, we have DISC in Rushmore, and we've made sort of huge efforts to bring shops on board, and it's not easy with something like that, because shop workers, can obviously change quite often. It's getting them engaged, getting them on system, getting them reporting. But where it does work really well. And in Rushmore in particular, we're going to be part of UK PAC as well shortly. And so I think that's testament to the benefit that DISC has actually bought the area as well. And once we're part of that, I think the shops will really see some added benefit to it as well. But I would say that the police locally as well have had some great results, and the promotion of that on social media goes down so well, especially with some of our prolific offenders in Aldershot as well. And I'm going to decline to answer the question about the early release scheme, as that's not my forte.
So I think probably within policing we take a lot of things in our stride, so we don't necessarily recognise the cumulative effect sometimes of some of the things that are brought in. Undoubtedly, we feel the effects of it, whereby we might have someone who has been given some form of sentence and actually they're out sometimes before we know it again. So yes, absolutely, it will be affecting us, because again, they will quite often, by and large, continue to commit crimes, and actually depends on what conditions they're released under and what support packages these individuals might have that might then affect their ongoing offending. But I think it's not something that is within our control, and therefore we continue to do our job on a day-to-day basis and deal with what crime is committed in front of us and what we can investigate, and then what we can evidence and take to the criminal justice system for them to do their bit.
I think part where I was trying to get to was whether there'll be extra crime or not, we'll wait and see. But the early release of some prisoners, depending on the offence, the victims of crime may get an unexpected surprise that somebody that they expected was going to be not in the area for some time is going to be back a lot quicker. And it's just across the agencies. I think I was aware of a case in Hart recently where somebody was being released early and was coming back to accommodation, where somebody had been affected by a crime from this person was feeling vulnerable, and I understand that there was some good cross-agency work to try and resolve that particular issue, but it was whether that particular move to more people being released early is something that the partnership have discussed in terms of making sure we're all joined up, or whether that just happens anyway.
I think if I can come back on that, I think the majority of people that we see that are out under the early release scheme are potentially people that are not serving particularly long sentences. So I think those potentially people coming out whereby we have some real concerns about the impact on victims of crime, they've potentially got longer sentences, and that's quite well managed through probation in the courts, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot of them. So say, for example, if we've got a prolific shoplifter, they might be given 14 days, and then actually they serve a small proportion of that. So again, I think it depends on the nature of the crime, and actually if it's a more substantial offence and sentence, then there would be work that would be ongoing, and again that would be with probation, etc., etc., to manage, and again we'd have notification of that. So yes, we'd pick that up.
Chair, can I just come in a little bit on that as well, because we are very well tied in with our probation partners. Appreciate not here today, but certainly for offences against a person, we are normally notified. It goes through the district management meeting that we have daily, so victims are normally aware. To answer the question about homelessness, I think that is a little bit of a problem from time to time. So if there is someone that's been released, they haven't been perhaps prepared for that release because it's happened to them fairly quickly as well. If we have reports of homelessness, we had one this morning, I'm going to be visiting on the way home, then we'll engage with those people, we'll bring them into our housing, and also we've got the sort of PAG people, so the vulnerability side of that as well, because these are vulnerable people too, invariably, and we'll put a wrap around them in that way as well through that monthly meeting group.
I've got going back, I think, to something. I think it was I can't think it was Gillian might have said, or maybe it was Hayley. I can't remember. Sorry. That you were talking about the patrolling, and obviously, and I think it's Kane Simons talking about visibility, and obviously, totally agree that you can't be everywhere. And if you saw policemen, ladies standing around on every street, people would say we're living in a police state, and then you'd get all that. So, but the issue about like smart patrolling. And I'm going to talk about anecdotal collection of intelligence, because this is something that I know within my. Now I live in a ward that's quite high on the deprivation scale. There are also issues, knife crime, and we've had county lines and stuff as well, and all this sort of stuff within my area. And it's been quite, there's quite a lot of things going. There's quite a lot of drug dealing going on, and a lot of it people see, but getting them to report things in easily, and you talked about social media, people are obviously reluctant, especially when you've got neighbours that are doing it potentially and things like this, or people know of the people in the area and they might feel worried and they don't want to snitch, the usual sort of stuff. And obviously Crime Stoppers, I'm fully aware of Crime Stoppers, but having several ways that make this really easy for people to report in, and then following that up with some focused patrolling in those areas would actually potentially mean that you could maximise resourcing. Now, I know, because I eventually found, because when you look to go to report things, they ask for all sorts of details of specific times, specific days. Quite often people will say, in my, for example, it's by that block of garages and it's usually in the afternoon, for example. And that sort of information is very hard to put in. However, I did find the form that you can fill in, which was eventually shared by Phil here when we had our meeting with Charlie Alderton. And I then went through to the link. It's really hidden away, and that's not helpful. People should be able to pull that, should be able to have somewhere, and it should be visible, and it should be easy to fill in. It's actually put under a child safety campaign thing. I think it's a CIS form, does that? CPI film, that's it, yeah. So things like that, and any ideas on this one or how that can be improved would be really good, because I think you would get a lot better intelligence, and you would get, even though you might get, some of it's obviously going to be spurious, but then you could actually help to focus your limited resources.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how we do focus our resources, through intelligence and reporting. The CPI form that you're referring to, obviously that is sort of specifically for partners and councillors as opposed to kind of the general public. And we would encourage people to report through the Crime Stoppers and sort of phone in any concerns. Because obviously when we're talking about resources, and we talk about drug problems, for instance, that is something that there is a lot of in lots of different places. And an element of what our job is we have to kind of prioritise where we put our resources, and that will be based heavily around that reporting element of it. And it doesn't have to just be intelligence, it just has to be people phoning us and telling us about stuff that is happening. And what we can do as well is if we get like if we get a flurry of reporting in one area, for instance, then we can look at enhancing that by kind of doing ASB surveys, so we can actually come to the area and talk to people and find out what's happening from that perspective. But the problem is, if we don't get that information, then we can't prioritise that over something else. So I think the CPI process, that's obviously specifically for partners and councillors, but outside of that, I think we would just want people to be phoning in as often. And I know it's frustrating because sometimes you can phone it in. You can do it online as well. So, you know, there are, when you're saying about something else, what else would you like to see in terms of reporting and how to report in?
I think the issue that I found, and I don't know if my colleagues will have similar experiences on this, but it seems to me that there seems to be quite specifics that you're after, whereas when I'm talking about it's more sort of generalised information about particular areas that people might be more willing to do. The principle is to keep it simple, and keeping things simple, because people are reluctant, I think, a lot of the time to be reporting things in their neighbourhoods. And I know we've certainly, as councillors within our area, have pushed Crime Stoppers quite a bit. I don't know how effective it's been or not. It's very difficult to see without having any information back. But I think making sure it's either, if that's the way you want people to do it, then to heavily promote it and to push it forward. But basically, the minimum amount of information they've got to give that you can deal with, that helps build your pictures, and making sure that stuff is out there and it's sort of visible on social media, for example, and things like that, and say, just click here, put it in, and then you've got that information. I think it might help.
Yeah, I mean, from a social media perspective, pretty much every post that we put out, we will actually have the Crime Stoppers stuff on it as well. So, for that exact reason, and we will always try to, whatever those posts are, that will be encouraged, because it's absolutely essential. Because without us being told what's happening within the communities, we can only, it's a finger in the air job as opposed to actually really understanding what's happening in the communities. So, yeah, I think from our perspective, it is essential, but we will try to advertise Crime Stoppers and everything. And I think in terms of the general aspect, the more information we can get, we can be more targeted with. So if we are, if it's too general, we don't really understand what the problem is, and that's why I think you probably get probed for lots of different bits of information. Because if we just get told there's some stuff happening in a street, well, the streets are really big, and that is harder to determine exactly what we're looking at. So, and I understand that puts pressure on people because they don't want to be kind of the person that's saying, well, it's actually this address and that address. But the more information we get, and we can get, it does allow us to be more targeted and to respond more effectively to what the problem is as well. So that's kind of why we would try to get as much information as we can. But that said, if we're getting lots of reports in one area, even if they're a bit more generalised, then that would kind of pique our reason and our necessity to have a look at it and kind of go, okay, what is happening in this area? And then we'd work out how we would respond to that.
Probably build on what Hayley says then as well in relation to certainly from a local level, that we quite often used to hear, and certainly from feedback from our community safety patrol officers, which are out and about and engaging with residents on a daily basis. A lot of feedback in relation to previous difficulties with contacting and reporting things through to the police. I don't want to speak on behalf of the police, but I think there's been quite a lot of improvements to the 101 service. Certainly the feedback I'm getting now is there's less in terms of people coming back and saying that they're having difficulties in reporting things, which I think helps to enable people to report, because actually as practitioners we're saying to people, we really need you to report things, because one, actually that gets your voice heard, but two, it also allows us to build a picture up as agencies, and we have review meetings that's done at various different levels. I'll give an example of something which we do at Basingstoke as part of our partnership action group. We have what's called our problem solving focus group that brings together different the police, the housing associations, members of council staff, other agencies which are relevant to the local area. We'll look at and consider, and very fortunately we have an analyst which is able to produce reports which are really helpful to say this is where our problem areas are happening. So we've got that evidence base to start with. Here's our evidence base. This is from the local community who are reporting things in. I didn't mention that with the 101 service, online reporting, and that's obviously available, and has helped with enabling people to report things through as well. We can look at that data which has come about, look at the feedback from officers on the ground as well, and then be able to put robust plans in place to say this is where we need to target our resources effectively, and that can be really helpful, and doing that in a partnership way is quite impactful as well.
So I just want to touch on the point that David's made in relation to reporting and our ability to respond to that. Having sat on a couple of these meetings now, I know that over the past couple of years there's been a lot of concern from communities in terms of the kind of 101 online service. The force has made some massive investments in it, and I know that if Terry was here he would absolutely be advocating the fact that there's been significant improvement in it, and actually just we have seen a real increase in demand even in the first 2 weeks of June, where I think across the force we've responded to 800 more calls than we would have this same period last year, and actually that's through some of the efficiencies that we've made within our contact management service. Actually we're responding to calls far quicker, which then means they're going to our control room for deployment, whereas before that might have seen people dropping off the line because actually they're waiting too long. So that is certainly far improved, and hopefully that is starting to show out and play to the communities.
I think just to add a comment, I think that would have been nice to see that in the report, actually, to hear about that.
Absolutely get that. To be honest, that's only just been of late, but yes, absolutely.
I'll allow you that one. And any further questions? Stacey.
Thank you, Jackie. I had a thought, I guess, that touched on a number of the things that we've covered here. This is like one of those sort of merry-go-round things that you're kind of waiting to hop on the right point for your question, and it never quite gets there, does it? But I was wondering about the sort of expertise you have among you. This partnership is something that is clearly very, effective, judging by everything we've heard here. And I'm sure that within each of your, individual organisations or whatever it is, there will be obviously data feedback to the higher ups, whoever the next level up is. Some of that, may eventually make its way up to the sorts of people who make policy decisions that might help to do the jobs that you do. And I wondered whether, when you were speaking earlier about doing things sort of in a more strategic, looking at strategic planning, prevention is, always better than cure. And as a collective, because of the way you work and the way you work together, you have, probably a very powerful voice and an exceptional grasp on what a lot of the root causes of these things are. I'm sure that some of them are painfully obvious. In this, report, they're talking about wider social issues as a cause to do with everything from, ASB to shoplifting and all of the sorts of things that you're dealing with that are like a knotty ball of rubber bands. As a collective, is there any pipeline where your sort of married voice, if you like, gets heard upwards, or could be, to better inform the sorts of policy decisions that might potentially be made around things that may help. I'm sure on an individual level within your organisations that you do that already, but I don't know whether there's an argument for saying that as a collective that's a more powerful thing. I think I asked a very, very similar question last year about acquisitive crimes and antisocial things in terms of poverty prevention, and I think I was told that the health partners needed to get back to me on that one. But, sorry, Karen.
Just on sort of a personal note, at Rushmore I get a lot of stuff from the LGA come in, and I'm sure my colleagues do as well. I'd say in the past couple of years there's been much more opportunity to sit on panels to discuss policy development, and that's positive in terms of domestic homicide views, in terms of the community safety partnership review that was being carried out by the previous government but now seems to have just, I'm not sure where that is now, somewhere in the ether. There's discussion around the crime and policing bill around antisocial behaviour recording and how local authorities and agencies do that. There's some sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks with the LGA to talk about that with individual authorities on how we do that, how that's being done, best practice elsewhere, and what that can look like in the future. And I'm sitting on one of those panels, so there's some definite positive stuff going on there. In terms of the broader CSP and lobbying potentially, pushing our thoughts and views forward on things like that, there has been many years ago, I can't even remember what the topic was, but we did send a letter about something to someone in government. There's absolutely opportunities to do that as well there if there's something we feel isn't working or could be working better. That's my 2 pence.
I think I can add to that as well, and certainly I would definitely agree with what David has said there, that the LGA have reached out and provide quite a lot of awareness and sessions. Then there's more specific things as well. So when we look at domestic homicide reviews, there's been work which has taken place at a county level to look at that and what could be done in relation to recognising some of the challenges which exist around that and how we can best respond to them. Because obviously as a community safety partnership we have a duty in relation to responding to notifications of domestic homicide or domestic abuse related deaths, and it's where there's some of it's being able to have that conduit to raise them challenges up, and there has been opportunities for that, I think, which has been positive.
Has anybody got anything else they'd like to scrutinise or ask on the reports? Stacey?
There were just a couple of other bits that I was curious about. There are a couple of mentions in the report. There's one on page 26, I think. She looks at her notes, talking about issues with data sharing. That one refers to health data, I think particularly. There is also a mention of here in Basingstoke seeking to establish data sharing with Stop Domestic Abuse in the partnership plan. There aren't any mentions that I could see anywhere else in the report about how those things are going, whether there's any barriers to those or what in particular terms of the challenges that are mentioned in on page 26 in the health data, what is happening about combating those.
We don't have any of our analysts here. I think probably best placed to answer on some of those discussions in terms of getting that data, and I know there is work going on, especially in terms of health. That's been a problem for years. I think getting health data, it's something that could really assist some of our work. Discussions seem to go on for a long time. It's something that I think potentially we can take away and get an update for you. If that would be helpful, a sort of more detailed answer rather than my rambling. I can't give you a specific one.
I just wonder whether we've got an opportunity. Local government reorganisation is a pain and it is difficult. Don't pull that face, David. But it is an opportunity to put some of those requests in. You know, there is clearly, isn't there, a movement that says let's try and co-terminate local government with health, whatever that means for a care system, whatever that means for how systems need to work, whatever that means as far as the powers the mayor may have. So I think if there's an opportunity to escalate that somewhere as a recommendation, Jackie, I think that's making sure we put that in there. Clearly North Hampshire will want to make its position very clear about reorganisation and whatever that might mean. So putting that in there, we know, don't we, with all of those serious case reviews, oversharing of data has never been a criticism, ever.
I can probably add as well. So there's been some work which has been certainly, I'm not quite sure if it's led on, but the violence reduction unit have been pushing forward, because actually there's that intrinsic link between health and community safety and crime. And having the data which supports that around it to help allow for evidential-based decision making is really important. There is a system which is being developed at the moment which works across the Thames Valley, and the plan is for Hampshire as well, which supports some of that data coming together. We're very fortunate in the local area that we've got analysts at Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore. So we have an analyst that covers Basingstoke and Hart area, and Rushmore has their own analyst, which is, and I know our own analyst is part of that working group to develop that further. That's really quite exciting to see, but it's not quite live yet. So hopefully once that opens up, that will allow better insights and opportunities to what we can consider as a partnership as well, how we can then best respond to that.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end. I'm going to sum up, and because there's sort of a couple of comments and sort of a general feel I've got from this. We started off talking a lot about the lack of potential data, or whether it was qualitative or quantitative, and also whether or not this report was answering the question of and celebrating the success really of the partnership, which possibly might have undersold itself. One thing we did talk about a bit was it was around the who should be in the room as well, which I think was quite important, and where we go with that. And I think it was recognised, I hope I'm correct in saying, thought at least the housing associations, there should be some sort of opening up towards them. And there was the comment made as well about the fact that the social care sector's missing. Which I think, and this ties in kind of like with these final comments we've had here, because in order to answer the problems where there are problems around antisocial behaviour and all sorts of issues, as we say, we all know that these quite often are all intermingled, and if you haven't got that joined up approach, and if that's whether it's down to data, restrictions, whether that's down to GDPR, whatever, I'm adding that in because we know that's what a lot of this may well be, or whether it's systems and departments talking to each other. But the lack of some of the partners here, I think, also makes it difficult to really truly scrutinise, and both scrutinising it as a friendly approach, obviously, and also to celebrate what we've done. I think that was it, really. I think there was there's a lot of questions that have come from us to sort of try and get underneath the skin of this, really, and I think that's probably it. But thank you everybody who has come today. It is appreciated, you giving up your time. I know you're all very busy people, and it's most welcome. So I think on that one I'll just go on to close that report. And item 6 is the exclusion of press and public. That's where we consider whether, in view of the nature of the remaining items on the agenda, as any of them are likely to involve the disclosure of exempt or confidential information within the terms of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and there isn't anything. So I think we can duly call the meeting to a close. Okay, thank you very much everybody for coming, and safe journeys home, those that have got to travel. Thank you.